Hi, everyone. Welcome to week number 5. My name is Linda Rossetti, and I'm thrilled you're here at Your Move, making the most of your next transition. This week, our topic is what's next, right? We're really pivoting our attention to try to think about the future and how our work can influence our actions in the future. You know, we all live in this society where we're so interested in do. We've held kind of tread water a bit in the last couple of weeks, trying to really get a sense for what brings us to this moment. And now we're really going to pivot our attention to shaping or putting shape to that do loop that hopefully will all begin soon. Let me just review where we've been before I target on our thinking for this week, right? We did start with this notion that everyone comes to transition from a different place, right? Some can arrive with a very clear sense of what needs to be next, right? Some people say, oh, I need a new job, I want to move, I need a new spouse, all sorts of things, right? Others arrive at transition with much more of a sense that something isn't right, but less able to articulate what in fact they want next. It doesn't matter which thing brings you to transition, right? We've spent most of the last 4 weeks thinking about what are those things maybe below those headlines that really make you think that it's time for maybe something new. So we've spent a fair amount of time wondering what brings us to this moment. We also took a few minutes to look at the difference between change and transition, right? Changes are very goal-oriented. We use them to execute a specific task, whereas transitions occur when there is a shift in what holds value or meaning to us, and they require us to re-examine our assumptions about our identity, our capacity, and our values, right? Very often, transitions occur at this moment where we have to really rethink who we are and what makes meaning in our lives. Beyond that, we did look at the notion that transitions aren't these kind of event-driven things that most of us in society have been conditioned to believe, right? Transitions are actually a process, and they involve a trigger, right, which are usually very important catalysts for the process. But triggers do nothing more than deposit us at an opportunity to make a decision, because in fact, transition is a choice. Right? It is never something we are forced to do. Transition is a choice. So when we experience a trigger, we're deposited at this moment that allows us to make a choice. And the choice that we can make is our own. And we may choose at that moment to pursue transition. We may choose to pursue change. We may decide to have no decision and kind of stay with the status quo. And there's hundreds of other choices. But our work together is really to think about, well, when we choose transition, what in fact does that mean? And last week we started to think about what that process looks like, right? In fact, that process has 3 different parts, right? The first is to envision what might be next for us. The second is to validate that vision. And the third piece is to take the learnings from those 2 steps and really think about them and then restart the process, right? It's kind of a renewal loop. So the process of transitioning, once we agree that in fact this is what we want to do, we start this repetitive cycle of envisioning, validating, and renewing our thoughts about what in fact is next. And so this week, we are going to begin to do some more work in envisioning, right? Last week we started a little bit with the open door exercise, right? But I want to say a little bit more about what those imagined possibilities were all about, right? There was a very famous psychologist and researcher in the 70s whose name was Daniel Levinson, who did a lot of work with this notion of dreams. And some people, including myself, find the word dreams very fluffy, right? The techie kind of entrepreneur side of me needs it to be slightly different. And so I loved Levinson's work because he thought of dreams as imagined possibilities. And his research revealed some very important characteristics about dreams. In fact, he said that as adults, as we enter adulthood, right, when we're 18 or 20, in our early adulthood, the great majority of people have poorly formed dreams. And he posits that the work of our lifetime is really to bring focus to those dreams. And so the first work that we do in the process of transitioning is really trying to envision. And very often society has taught us to, ignore our dreams, right? Preferring, in fact, to define ourselves or our identity by dreams, in a certain community, right? It can be a faith-based community. It can be an occupational or professional community. It can be our geographic community, our family community, all sorts of ways, right? So very often as adults enter adulthood with poorly formed dreams, we try on these provisional identities that really emerge from our personal ecosystem. And so the first thing we need to do in transitioning is to almost re-envision, right? To recognize and accept the dreams that we've already explored and perhaps vetted. Take a look at those and rethink and open our hearts to those things that might engage more of who we are or engage us in a way that might be different than some of those initial pursuits allowed. Right, so our first step is envisioning. And so this week we'll do an exercise that is all about our own narratives, right? Using the notion of story as an entree into exploring our dreams in a slightly different way. And then from there, we'll work, not this week, but the following weeks, we'll work to validate and really think through what it means to validate. Very often as we get close to dreams, we can all shy away because we've been almost reflexively taught that our dreams aren't the ones that need to be prioritized, right? So this week, the biggest challenge is not to begin to dream, but to stop ourselves from shutting it down or revectoring it. Oh, no, that's for later or another time. It really is just to try to sit with kind of who we are and those things that might engage us. And I have to remind us that our work in transitioning, right, as we rethink our identity, our capacity, and our values, is really all about a very independent response. And so what comes up for me is going to be entirely different than what comes up for you. And I just want to say one more word about the cyclical nature of transitioning. And I'm going to use my story as an illustration of what I mean, right? When I started my work in transition, right, I first of all knew none of this vocabulary and the structure that now helps me explain it to you. But what I did understand at the time was that my trigger was a job or job-related issue, right? All of a sudden, what I had done for nearly a quarter of a century kind of lost its meaning, right? I remember sitting in my boss's staff meeting, and he was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and I was looking around like, you've got to be kidding me. This is it? I've worked this hard for this? And so, suffice it to say, I felt as if, what I had prioritized, which was work, I was somebody who worked night and day all the time, all of a sudden kind of shifted or lost its meaning. And I worked through a cycle of envisioning that helped me kind of reimagine those things that would engage me. I validated it. I started to think about transition as a topic, and I started a blog. And from a blog, I started to do some research because I found that I loved writing the blog, but I didn't have so much to say. I only had my own experience. The research really opened an entirely new door for me. And ultimately, a series of activities led me to starting what is the Transition Institute, which is an LLC that I use to do an enormous amount of consulting, both to individuals and corporations about transition. It's helped me write my first book. It's helped me write my second book, right? So I would say that I solved the job, right? Remember, my first trigger was this job, this loss of meaning in my job. But the process of transition sent me on another loop, because even with the new job, there were still things that I felt were undone and required me to continue. And it was in subsequent cycles of transitioning, after I had begun to have this very rich, completely fun job that was connected to who I am, that only revealed more layers of things that I needed to address as I transitioned. So I went through another cycle. So today, I want you to recognize that we're beginning a cycle together. It may not be the only cycle you pursue in transition, but I guarantee you that it will present learnings to you that will allow you to reshape kind of your thinking about who you are and how you make meaning in the world. And it will very likely introduce to you additional questions that you may want to explore as you continue to get proficient at this notion of transitioning. So welcome to week number 5. I hope that you enjoy the exercises. Please do consider joining us on Thursday at lunchtime. And I look forward to talking with you. If for whatever reason you need to talk to me urgently or in between the scheduled meetings, don't hesitate to drop me a note or a text. I'd love to connect. Good luck with the exercises. Talk to you soon.